everybody. Today we are going to talk about intimacy. So this is a topic that we sometimes avoid as parents. We think that intimacy just means sex, and sometimes it's really hard to talk to our teens about sex. And so often we skip the topic altogether, forgetting that there is a lot more to intimacy than just sex. My mom gave me this amazing handout that she put together years and years ago for a class. And so I'm redesigning it, and we're going to talk about some of the things that she talks about on that handout. To start with, let's talk about what intimacy is, because this is very important for teenagers to know, especially in the world now with social media and online interactions, pornography. They need to understand what intimacy is. So here's a couple quotes that I liked. This is what one's by someone, it was unknown. I couldn't find an author. It says, "Intimacy is not purely physical. It is the act of connecting with someone so deeply you feel like you can see into their soul." Another one by Taylor Reed, "Intimacy is about truth. When you realize you can tell someone your truth, when you can show yourself to them, when you stand in front of them and their response is, 'You are safe with me,' that's intimacy." Intimacy is also just the sense of people knowing you and loving you, connecting, social connection. It's very important. We've been watching the happiness course through Yale, that free course, and it talks so much about happiness coming from social interaction. And so deep intimacy requires vulnerability, it requires honesty, but there's also lots of other types of intimacy that aren't as deep. So let's talk about some of those. So first I want to talk about the circle of support. So within a few days I'll have a handout for you in the group. My husband is designing it right now, and then you can share it with your team. So a circle of support is, it's basically the people around you. So there's you, picture yourself in the middle of the circle. And the first circle is intimacy. So those are the people that you absolutely know and trust, maybe family members, that type of thing. The second one is the circle of friendship. So this is your friends. The circle of participation. So those are people who are in your life, but you're maybe not very close to. So it could be, for your teenager, it could be friends that they see at school, but they aren't super friends with. They just see them often. The final circle is a circle of exchange. So those are people that you pay or who pay you. So doctors, dentists, grocery store clerks, just people who are in your life, but you exchange something to have a relationship with them. So the most important thing is to first start talking to your team about who belongs in those circles and what those circles are. What do they mean? So if you have a friend at school and you just don't get along very well, but you keep trying to share more intimate details with them about your life, whether it's your thoughts or your emotions, and then they hurt you, well, they shouldn't really be in your inner circle, should they? You don't really trust and respect them. And so it's just sort of helping our teens navigate. I mean, strangers on social media, you should not be burying your deepest soul to them, because they are not in your first circle. They are in your third circle. You're not paying them, so they're not the furthest circle out, but they're certainly not, they're strangers. They're people that you don't know very well. And so it's just a matter of first starting to kind of help your teen understand these different levels of the way that we interact with people, and who do we trust, who do we not trust, who do we respect, who do we not respect. So once you've had that conversation with your teen, and maybe even talk about who belongs in which circles and why, and start just talking about some of their friendships, and but then also people that they don't know very well but they also interact with, and then kind of what types of things to share with those people. So after you do that, that's where this gets really interesting, I think, is then you start talking about the levels of intimacy, and they kind of line up with those four circles, but they can kind of move around a little bit. So there's different types of intimacy, and it's not just physical. There's mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical intimacy. And so we're going to talk about each one of those for a minute. So what would mental intimacy look like? So this is your thoughts. So for example, number one, so these are backwards from those circles. So this would be like the outermost circle of people and how you would interact with them. One is that you would share general information. So this would be with either the circle of exchange, probably, just general information about the weather or about politics. Well, I don't know, maybe not politics nowadays, but, things that are kind of not as intimate. Things that you can maybe share a few of your ideas or a few of your opinions, but you need to be careful, because this is people that you have not developed trust with. So number two, so this would be maybe with the circle of participation. Maybe share some of your own thoughts and ideas. And you'll want to choose these thoughts and ideas wisely, but you can start talking about things that are a little bit more personal with people who aren't quite strangers, but aren't necessarily in your circle of friendship either. So the third level of mental intimacy would be to share your dreams and your aspirations. So this would be with your friends. To really start talking about your future jobs, future school, all those sort of things. What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you dream? What are some of your strengths? That sort of thing. And then the final one, this could also be with your friends, but you kind of share or create dreams and ideas and thoughts together. So this is where you really start trusting people. You exchange, you listen more deeply, you just trust them implicitly with your deepest thoughts and your deepest dreams. So let's talk about emotional intimacy. So starting back out on the outer layer again, so this in your circle of exchange, let's talk about general emotions. Maybe I like pizza, I dislike this, I like this, I don't like that, and just general likes and dislikes, maybe very basic emotions that aren't super intimate, but just kind of basic information. 2, so this would be kind of the people that you know kind of well, they're in your circle of participation. You share more of your feelings, happy, sad, discouraged, anger, embarrassed. Maybe you don't go into deeper emotions like shame and guilt and stuff like that, but you might talk about things that made you happy or that something made you sad. And just as comfortable as you are, depending on how well you know them. The 3rd, so this was with your friends, you can start talking about more private inner feelings and how you really feel about things that matter more. So maybe not you're feeling about the movie you saw, but things that you feel a little bit more deeply. And finally, with your family, you work to really create deep emotional bonding, commitment, and this is where you'd feel comfortable sharing just about anything with these people. So let's talk about spiritual intimacy. So this is going to depend obviously on your religion and on what your beliefs about spirituality, but it's still very important to discuss no matter where you fall, whether you're atheist or religious or where you fall. This is a very important thing to talk about because people have different opinions on it and you want to be careful what you share with who. So the first one, so this would be, the circle of exchange type people. And this one kind of goes also with circle participation, just depending on who you're with. But this would just be talking about random spiritual things, maybe the purpose of life or a few principles, whether or not you believe in God. Like I said, you may not have this conversation in your circle of exchange. It might be more like your circle of participation, as well as and then as you start to move into circle of friendship, maybe some of your ideas about just your ideas about spiritual things. So nothing super personal, but just kind of maybe what religion you are or not are, that sort of thing. So then when you get into closer friends, then you start sharing maybe a few more personal spiritual experiences. And then finally with your family, you might feel spiritually linked. Whether or not you agree 100% on spiritual things, you have that developed deep love and trust for each other that you can really talk more deeply about spiritual things. So finally, let's talk about physical. So this one is a lot more obvious. It's the one that we tend to think of when we talk about intimacy, but it's important to discuss different types of intimacy with our teens and when it's appropriate. And you can kind of make this fit your family and what you believe. But so circle of exchange would maybe you just sit and stand near someone, your hairdresser, your doctor, whoever. You're just in close physical contact-ish with somebody. So second, you might have some interactive touching, like a light touch or holding hands. Could be games, could be sports, could be dancing, could be handing things off, that sort of thing where it's just not super personal, but you just need to touch people for whatever reason. The third, with your friends, would be maybe like hugging or embracing, any sort of non-sexual touching. So this could be with boys or girls, romantic, non-romantic. This fits with any relationship until we start moving into the rest of it. So you can talk with your teens about, different people and what's your personal zone, how you feel about people being around you, what your bubble is, what's appropriate, what's not. So then when you move with like a partner, then you move, so this would be in your innermost circle, kissing and then touching sexual organs, private parts, and then sex. And so how you want to talk about that with your teen is totally up to you. But it's important to recognize the difference because a lot of times the things that they see on the media, they skip some of these steps or these steps are confusing or it's a good time to talk about consent, but we're going to talk about that more in the group because it's such an important topic. But it's important, like I said, to help your teens recognize that there are these circles and there are different levels of intimacy and also different types of intimacy. And so how do we handle all of those different types with all of the different people in our lives? So just in closing, I want you to consider too that we have intimacy with our teens, and the type of relationship that we create with them and the type of trust and respect we have for each other can make a lifelong impact on our teens. And so, where does your teen fall in these circles? Has your teen hurt you? Have you hurt your teen? Are you rebuilding trust? Because if you are, you might want to avoid, let's say, circle 4 until you kind of can rebuild that trust with your teen. Do you talk about things mentally? Do you talk about your emotions? Do they talk about their emotions? All of these different areas. Do they like to be hugged? Do they not like to be hugged? Why? And so to really just start considering the types of intimacy that you have with your teen. And also, just here's a few more things to do if you would like to feel closer to your teen. One is to just start disclosing more information, make time for conversations. We do nights once a week with each of our kids. At least we did. We've kind of fallen apart with the coronavirus. But we set aside, 20 minutes with one parent for a kid while the other parent goes and puts the other kids to bed. So we need to do a little bit better job. But sometimes setting aside time like that can really help you get deeper with your teen. Shake up the routine, change up routine, do something fun and new together, talk openly about your needs. Even if your teen is not ready to open up to you about their needs, you can demonstrate how to discuss important things. Ensure that it's safe to talk to them, ask them if they feel safe talking to you. Anyway, all these things will kind of help you start to teach your teen about intimacy as well as to develop greater types of intimacy with your teen. So we're going to talk about that more this week, and I will see you in the group.